Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And in today's Summer Blockbuster Special, we are discussing two of the biggest films of the year. Yes, it's Disclosure Day and Supergirl. I have opinions on, things that are likely to be the talk of this year. But before all of that, Nick, what else do you have to recommend to our listeners?
Well, speaking of major movies and superhero spin-offs, I'm going to talk briefly about a superhero spin-off starring a major movie star. I am talking, of course, about Spider-Noir on Amazon Prime, the spin-off from the Spider-Verse animated movies, starring Nicolas Cage playing the noir version of Spider-Man that he voiced in those movies, but this time in full three-dimensional live action, and in fact because they're really committing to the noir gimmick in both colour and black and white. Although I have only watched the black and white version because they said that was the authentic version, so I decided that must be the better one. Well, I did, then once I finished it, go back and watch about 10 minutes of the colour version just out of curiosity. I'm not watching it twice, but I did watch a few minutes of the colour.
You love Spider-Man, but there are some limits.
Yeah, watching the same TV show twice in the same 2 weeks is one of those limits. Yeah, this is actually quite fun, as I guess you might expect for something starring Nicolas Cage. It's quite strange. It stylistically commits very hard to the noir thing. It's basically, Nicolas Cage playing this gumshoe detective who's also secretly the Spider rather than Spider-Man, and sort of noir criminal versions of various Spider-Man villains like Electro and Sandman turn up. There's a femme fatale who is basically the Black Cat. Oh, and Robbie Robertson turns up, and gumshoe detective Nicolas Cage sort of stumbles through this mystery about where his powers came from and how it might be tied to the emergence of all these supervillains, whilst just gurning furiously, to be honest. I mean, I haven't actually, due to my well-documented lack of cinematic experience, I have not actually watched that many Nicolas Cage movies. About 2 or 3 maybe? So I'm not actually that down with the man's work. But yeah, after watching 8 solid episodes of Nick Cage making weird faces, twitching, suddenly going into weird voices for no discernible reason, and doing strange jerking movements, yeah, I see the appeal. It's one of those superhero shows where it's about 20 times more interesting when the lead character is on screen, which happily is most of the time, because, this show knows what side its bread is buttered, and that side is the side with Nicolas Cage on it.
Yeah, I've also seen almost all of this TV show. I think I've got possibly 1 or maybe 2 episodes to go. But yeah, it's definitely Nicolas Cage doing weird. For those uninitiated, there are 2 types of Nicolas Cage performances: normal and a bit weird and over the top. And there seems to be no correlation of whether that means good film. There are bad normal ones, there are good normal ones. There are bad over the top ones, there's weird over the top ones. There's an episode of Community where a character is driven insane by trying to formulate a grand theory of Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, it's very accurate. But yeah, especially I think it's episode 6 when there's a flashback to how he became the Spider, and there's a lot of Nicolas Cage pulling weird facial expressions, twisting his body in some strange ways,
lying on a bed and begging like a dog at one point. It's all good stuff.
Yeah. But throughout, Nicolas Cage is a really good, gumshoe and stuff. He's got a bit of edge. He's got that sort of mournfulness to him as well of a man who's been through some trauma. He's got enough acting chops to make it believable and realistic. I mean, it works quite well that it's a quite stylized universe, so it calls for a bit of hamming it up almost. But I really like this show, actually. I think it's pretty good. Yeah, Nicolas Cage, good actor. It's interesting how well actually they managed to blend together the Spider-Man sort of aesthetic with the film noir aesthetic. They work pretty well together. Urban setting, New York, tragic backstory, someone who's lost someone and then reminded of the consequences of action. There's a femme fatale, there's criminal gangs. It's set during Prohibition, so there's bootlegging of booze going on. It's pretty good how they managed to make Spider-Man and film noir go together so well.
I guess one of the big elements of Spider-Man that they haven't so much got in the film noir setting is him being this sort of disastrous nerd who's always awkwardly fucking things up, but instead he's this sort of loser gumshoe detective. The vibe is, instead of the feeling being that he's fucking everything up because he's an awkward nerd, the vibe is that he's fucking everything up because he's a loser drunk, which it turns out works quite well.
Yeah, and it's very film noir as well, yeah.
And the film noir thing, it's actually really nicely shot. I mean, I'm sure the black and white. Are you watching the colour or the black and white?
I am watching the black and white because A, I love film noir, and B, the colour one looks like dog shit.
Yeah, I did read a couple of tweets about how actually the colour version is really interesting if you take the idea that they're actually trying to capture the vibe of a black and white film that's been recoloured after the fact. Maybe there's something to that. I don't have enough knowledge of film noir to know if that's a common phenomenon, but I watched the black and white because it looked cooler and it was described as authentic.
Yeah, and this is obviously the aesthetic that they're aiming for, the film noir. It's part of the rich in the mood. I haven't read anything about how it was shot, but what I can imagine it was shot in colour and then colour corrected to black and white, which is why the colour version probably looks quite flat, because it's designed to be easily colour corrected. A lot of the lighting effects, I assume, for the black and white stuff are done in post.
I don't know, but it does look good. Yeah, there's a lot of good scenes taking advantage of the sort of the high contrast. There's a lot of weird reflections. There's a lot of like close-ups and stuff. And yeah, it's very atmospheric. It's hard not to slip into parody, this, considering how ridiculous Nicolas Cage is acting. But it doesn't quite feel like it's taking the piss. It does feel like it's a sort of affectionate rendition, even though Nicolas Cage is, again, gurning like a maniac.
It walks a fine line in that, like, it's not, like, played for laughs, but you're also not supposed to take it completely seriously. But then there are some film noirs that are quite over the top as well. There's very much a sense of, like, genre coming through. Like, it's similar to watching Aaron Sorkin's. I mean, Aaron Sorkin's has got to be a film noir fan because that sort of banter, that back and forth, the one-liners and the quips is very film noir. And there's that sense of, like, when you're watching one, like, oh, this isn't how actual people actually talk. It's very much, like, stylized, which old Hollywood had that quite a lot. Westerns are like the same. There is always this sense of like, this is, not supposed to be realistic. This is supposed to be, sort of a fantasy. And again, that works well with the Spider-Man setting. And they really have like studied film noir or big film noir fans, because there's loads of little tiny things that are like very film noir. Like there's a bit when Nicolas Cage he's Ben Reilly actually in this one. Interesting. Nicolas Cage's Ben Reilly gets kidnapped and stuff, and there's him sort of being dragged out of his apartment, and you kind of see it reflected in like a puddle in the rain. And like that shot, I feel like that is just classic film noir, the way they did that.
Yeah, there's a bit towards the end in a sort of room full of mirrors, which is also very cool and very film noir. I know he's Ben Reilly, yes, I was going to mention that. Obviously, I'm pretty inclined to like anything that features a Spider-Man called Ben Reilly, because for those who don't know, that is the Spider-Man who was starring in the Spider-Man comics around the time I got into comics, so I have my 12-year-old nostalgia glasses on for the Ben Reilly character. I think the vague implication at one point is that Ben Reilly is actually an alias, so there's a fair chance his real name is Peter Parker, which I guess is a homage to, what the Ben Reilly name is in the comics as well. Maybe we'll get into that if there's ever a second season.
Yeah. Oh, I was wondering if that'd be one of the twists in the final episode, but yeah, I did pick up that it's probably an alias. The show also does some really interesting things with race. It's a kind of odd balance they're striking, which is that, like, obviously I said it's clearly a fantasy and things like that, and obviously, like, but it's modern Hollywood, so there's, like, it's ethnically diverse, which film noir really wasn't. But Robbie Robertson is played by a black actor, there's a East Asian woman is like the femme fatale, there's a black actor playing the Lizard, or their film noir version of the Lizard.
That's not the Lizard, that's Tombstone. It's Lonnie Lincoln.
Oh, yeah.
Did you watch Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man last year, or was that just me?
No, we covered it on the podcast.
Yeah, okay, I thought so.
Yeah,
that's the noir version of the kid in that, the one who is his sort of friend who joins a gang.
Yes, and his gang nickname's Tombstone. Yeah, I think
that was Tombstone. Yeah.
Right, yeah, sorry, got a bit confused there with my Spider-Man characters. He's played by a black actor, and what's interesting is that it's kind of weird that, like, they do acknowledge, like, because it's set in the 30s, right, and so obviously the racial politics was very contested at the time, shall we say, and they do acknowledge it. At first, I kind of thought, like, this is a sort of Hollywoodized fantasy take when, like, oh, this is a sort of racist America in the 1930s, which is fine, it's fantasy. It's also got, like, people shooting electricity out of their hands. But then they do acknowledge it in certain places, like, for example, there's a bit investigating events during the First World War, and they talk about how, like, the army was racially segregated in the First World War, which it was. It's kind of, like, played homage to at various points, but also this is clearly not the America of Jim Crow and things like that. I understand that, like, when they made this show, they were like, right, we are not going to make this a commentary on race of the time, which is fair enough. It's not really what they're aiming for. Film noir basically managed to, in many places, largely sidestep the issue of race by just having it. The story's just set in the world of white people, and there's just, like, really no people of colour beyond, like, waiters and things like that. It's not really something the genre deals with. I'm sure there are specific examples, not really that much of an expert in film noir, but also it's acknowledged at some point and kind of, implied and sort of, nodded towards this, the period period. There's also a bit that mentions like a whites-only club and things like that. Robbie Robinson can't go in for one of the plots. So, yeah, it's complicated. It was probably a PhD's worth of analysis in the treatment of race in Spider-Man Noir, but I did like the fact they acknowledged the Jim Crowness of the era, like, white-only clubs and segregation in the army and things like that, which is, rather than just pretending it didn't exist, which they could have got away with, because, like I say, it's a Spider-Man thing. It's not supposed to be in the heat of the night.
Well, yeah, I mean, both those characters, Robbie Robertson and Tombstone, are canonically black in the Spider-Man comics, so I guess in some ways that makes it easier to just dump them in there and go, well, yeah, that's just how it is.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that they acknowledged it, because, again, it is a very specific setting, and, they borrow other elements of the 1930s, like Prohibition, and there's, like, the Irish gangsters. Yeah, for Brendan Gleeson as their leader. Brendan Gleeson is excellent in everything, including here,
Yeah, he's not going as broad as Nicolas Cage, because you can really only have one person doing that before the whole production collapses. But he is definitely having some fun playing this sort of over-the-top Irish gangster character.
Yeah, I thought this was really well done, considering it's a spin-off from Spider-Verse, and I see it's a bit more of a sort of genre joke in Spider-Verse. Didn't know if this would stand up to be an 8-episode miniseries, but yeah, it does.
Yeah, no, this was really good. I was surprised. I wasn't fully prepared for this to be the rare live-action Spider-Man thing I don't bother watching, but I started to hear the buzz that this was actually good and fun, so I sat down and I was not disappointed. It's a good time. And what have you watched in the last 2 weeks, Alistair?
So I am here to recommend a play, which I do every so often, but this is one I actually paid to see rather than reviewed. And also, because it's not a fringe production, it's one you might be able to still go see, actually, if you buy tickets. So I went down to the Globe to see Mother Courage and Her Children, which is a modern update on the classic play by Bertolt Brecht. Again, actually, another 1930s sort of post-war theme emerging here. Yes, about a woman who has 3 children, and she's a sort of a tinker who travels around following various armies through a particularly complex and contested war, trying to keep her 3 children alive, and tragedy ensues. Yeah, this production of the Globe is really, really good. Yeah, the performances are phenomenal. They've just really nailed this, sort of made it slightly weird sci-fi post-apocalyptic aesthetic. They've updated a lot of the language to talk about like drones and gas attacks, because the original play was written in the 30s and set during the 30 Years' War. It just takes place in like places that are just given grid numbers, so there's no locations. It's just like North Grid 36 as the location. Yeah, there's this post-apocalyptic, a bit Mad Max style aesthetic of people with these sort of bizarre torn military uniforms, and everything's a bit like ramshackled. And yeah, I must say that like just as a production, it really, really works. And Brecht is not an easy one to do, and bizarrely not as popular as some of his contemporaries. Doesn't get staged very much, but so this is really, really special. So I recommend people go see it.
Nice. I must admit, I know almost nothing about this film or Brecht. Been to the Globe once.
The Globe is very nice, especially when it's as hot as this. It's actually nice to be theatre outdoors.
Yeah. Does Brecht have any big well-known plays I should have heard of?
Probably most famous, let me think, there's the Threepenny Opera. It's quite famous. It's probably most famous for giving us the song Mac the Knife.
I do know the song Mac the Knife. There we go.
That's where that's originally from. Good Person of Szechuan, another famous one.
No, fair enough. These are all things I vaguely heard of. Is he not staged much nowadays then?
No, it's not. I think it's quite challenging. His work is very, very political, but in a quite an abstract way. He was a practitioner of what he called epic theatre. The idea was that like most entertainment was, at the time, theatre, I suppose, in the burgeoning like film industry, was basically, most of it was to relax you and lull you into this sense of like complacency through entertainment, whereas epic theatre is supposed to disrupt your sort of status and comfort, and in order to engage you in political action. There's a lot of like strange rules to practice epic theatre properly, including things like stage directions being read out, because the idea is that to make you very, very aware that you're watching a play and ideas are being discussed. Most of the productions I've seen of Brecht, including this one, largely junk that, because this whole kind of making it feel quite artificial, because I guess it's not really what audiences want, and basically take the script and kind of do a straight up like, let's just do this as a play. But in this instance it works really well, because it has this really strong anti-war message running through it, or at least like about the complexities and how difficult it is to survive during war, because they have these elements of like chaos, like peace constantly breaks out, war breaks out, the sort of, it's impossible to know what to do or like what makes you safe, because the rules are just constantly changing in conflict. And yeah, and also this sense of like the fact that it takes place in this like bizarre unreal world of just grid squares, and this war seems to be going forever, gives you this sense of like it's just this perpetual never ending war that just like never ends, and the sides are just colours. They're just like blue, green, purple, orange every single time, like new colours are like emerging. So it's not really clear what people are fighting for or over what. Just seems to be this endless like just slaughter. So yeah, it leans into those like political aspects of it.
Well, Alistair, the more you describe that, the more I start to understand why someone might choose to bring that play back now at this exact time.
Yeah, very prescient, yeah. And especially where they mention things like, there's lots of discussion of things like drone attacks and things like that.
As in, Brecht talked about drones, or have they've
updated
added some drone references in?
I'm sure they've added some drone references in. Yeah, drone references and gas attacks and things like that. It was originally written in German, so this is in translation. I think it might be.
So in the original it was Das Drohnen.
Das Drohnen, yeah. I'm learning German, and I don't know if Drohnen is drone.
I just made that up.
Well, it's probably a loan word, to be fair. It's been updated. It's been sort of modernised very much, things like that, I guess, to keep it relevant. And also, all references to the 30-Year War are ditched. But if you know the play, you know what it's about. But also, it kind of applies to any nonsensical, ever-evolving conflict. And there's a lot of irony in there, in a really sad way, yeah. So I guess full spoilers on Mother Courage and Her Children, a play that was written about better part of 100 years ago. But yeah, Mother Courage's children all end up dead in ironic ways. Like, the one that's a good soldier gets executed for being a good soldier during an outbreak of peace, when it's not good to be a good soldier. The one who's really honest gets killed for being dishonest at one point, or at least caught up in a dishonest thing involving the theft of a wage packet. Her child, who doesn't speak, gets killed by making too much noise at one point to warn a village of an impending gas attack, and gets shot by a sniper. It's steeped in irony, and very, very sad. So it's a grim one.
Yeah, I was going to say, once you reveal that Mother Courage's children all die, it does sound like it's not going to be a cheery watch. Well, between that and all the war, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. It is a grim one. Brace yourself. Break yourself in many, many ways. But it is powerful. Michelle Terry is brilliant as Mother Courage. Again, in pretty much every scene, and it's a complicated, difficult part to play, I must say. And she really brings this force of nature performance exploding onto stage. It's one of those ones when it really makes the whole thing work, having someone clearly as talented as her in the main character.
Well, I guess if she is in it to that extent, you've got to find the right person, haven't you? You've got to get a powerhouse in to anchor the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, I can highly recommend this if you're into some political theatre, and even it's interesting because, for example, you get a lot more Beckett performed in London. In fact, we've recently had 2 runs in London of Crap's Last Tape and 2 runs of Waiting for Godot. Beckett is much harder playwright to get into, much more cryptic and weird than Brecht, even though Brecht has a reputation for being kind of dense and kind of hard to get into, but not as much as Beckett. And also, Brecht writing in the 1930s in Germany and then having to flee Germany because of the rise of fascism. It's got a lot to say about this current age, so I'm surprised more Brecht isn't done, but hopefully this high-profile production leads to something of a revival.
Well, hopefully, yes, the world will keep getting worse so that people can put on more Brecht plays.
Yes.
Fingers crossed. Okay, and first up this episode, it's one of this year's most eagerly awaited films. It's Disclosure Day, the latest film from legendary director Steven Spielberg, telling the story of 2 individuals played by Josh O'Connor and Emily Blunt, who, between them, are wrestling with the decision about unveiling the existence of aliens to an unready world. As they debate whether we're truly ready for this and how to tell us, they also find themselves on the run from a shadowy company personified by an evil Colin Firth. So can he stop them from disclosing, or will Disclosure Day happen in the end? You'll have to watch it to find out. Or, to be honest, I'm going to have to spoil the ending to talk about this film, so listen to this podcast long enough and I will tell you. In the meantime, Alistair, what did you think of this film?
Yes, there's a lot of expectations around this because it's a Spielberg film, and there seems to be even more focus on this than some of the previous Spielberg films, I guess, because he's returning to his kind of Close Encounters sort of alien contact material that he's explored a lot. The day after I saw it, I was speaking to someone and they said, it's shite. And I think that is really too harsh and is a very lazy take on this film. However, I guess that opinion is out there because there is something that just sort of doesn't work about this film, which is sad to say. But it's inconsistent rather than shite. It starts strong.
We've all in our life done an inconsistent shite.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think, especially in this heat.
Anyway.
But it starts strong, and it kind of drops you almost into the middle of the story with including on evolving situation involving a handover of material and a theft, and one of the main character's girlfriends being kidnapped, and it's really tense and it kind of throws you in and you have to figure it out as you go. And I kind of thought oh wow, bold decisions from a director who can get away with doing this sort of stuff. And I was kind of okay, this is interesting. And then it sort of falls apart a bit. The plot doesn't make sense. I've got detailed discussion of why, but I'll let Nick have his 2 cents before I go into that too much. But I just want to say that, yeah, even though it's kind of inconsistent, falls apart a bit, these big Spielbergian moments come through. He is good at the big emotions, much like Russell T Davies. So he can nail those big emotional moments, but overall it just doesn't quite hang together.
Yeah, I think for me this is one of those games of two halves, in that I think there is a lot of good stuff, especially in the sort of, well, a lot of the films, to be honest. The first probably 75%, 2/3, 75%, something like that, of it, I think works pretty well. I think he does a good job of quickly getting you into it and introducing the characters and getting going with minimal faff or annoying exposition. There's a lot of really good, like, thriller chase stuff in the middle when the characters are on the run from Colin Firth and his minions, and there's some exciting bits. There's, again, it's very classic cinema. There's a car chase, there's an exciting bit with a train, there's a weird sci-fi gimmick that Colin Firth uses to let him track them down, which allows Spielberg to do some cool visuals and some slightly unsettling techno-paranoia stuff, and that's all good. That's all honestly quite well done. And then, yeah, as Alistair said, it kind of reaches the ending, the last half hour or so, and the whole thing just sort of falls apart in slow motion. It's unfortunate because I think this is actually quite a polarizing film. Like, I have seen reviews which are like, this is a masterpiece. I have seen people say, I cried, man. I watched Disclosure Day and I just had such an amazing experience, and I just felt so much. Yeah, I watched most of it and thought, yeah, this is quite a good thriller. And then the ending happened and I thought, oh, but it doesn't make any sense. In some ways, maybe this would be a more interesting podcast if we had one on each side, but alas, it appears we're both going to just take turns giving it a kicking.
Yeah, well, we are very much aligned on this, but at the same time, we do kind of appreciate where it does work. I mean, yeah, Spielberg is definitely like a director of big emotions. Like, has a few emotional registers that he works really well in. So, like, one is The Noble Sacrifice, which runs through pretty much all his war things. He's done so many Second World War films. And the other emotional register is very much like the wonder, the cosmic wonder, which really, really works well with his alien stuff, and it's probably at its peak in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But there's bits of that in quite a few of his other films. And here, yeah, again, these moments of like awe and wonder at the bizarre alienness of, aliens comes through. And also, yeah, the sort of conspiratorial nature of this sort of Colin Farrell character in his organisation kind of has these big sort of broad emotions of like, tension and fear coming through. So, yeah, he's good at these big moments. And I'm willing to forgive Spielberg a few like plot holes and things like that for nailing the big emotions. But I just feel that like the plot holes just got a bit too big at this point.
It's frustrating in some ways because the difference between Spielberg and Russell T Davies is Spielberg actually is quite good at solid moment-to-moment storytelling a lot of the time. Like, a lot of the thriller stuff in the middle. God love Russell T Davies, and I've given good reviews to a lot of his work. But there are many, many occasions during Russell T Davies stories when he will just elide over huge chunks of the details of what's going on or how this happens. Because, we did that. We shoved the tinkle into the tonkle and now that's happened, so we can move on to the next thing. And it's very clear that he just doesn't want to spend time on it, or he doesn't have time because he'd rather spend his pages on the emotion. And Steven Spielberg does actually, make the practicalities work. I mean, yes, some of it is sci-fi stuff, but he does actually go, right, this does that does that goes here, this moves that, and therefore that person is there. Like, most of the time during the thriller stuff, one of the reasons the thriller stuff works, and this probably is, to be fair, a requirement if you're going to do a tense thriller, you actually are clear on what's going on, who is where, how that person gets from there to there. There are a few moments where the enemy foot soldiers are distractingly stupid, but aside from that, it does all mostly hang together. And arguably, maybe that just makes it all the more frustrating when you get to the end, and a lot of that just sort of falls away, and you just have, you just get this invitation to stare into the lights going, oh, the wonder. And I, a cynical monster, just sat there going, yeah, I'm just not feeling it, mate.
Yeah, that's one of Spielberg's emotional registers, but yeah, if you're too confused, you don't really get it.
Which is a shame, as I've enjoyed films like that before. Some of them may have even been directed by Spielberg. I'm not sure how many of his I've seen, but it's nice when you can understand the sheer beauty of something and have a nice cry at the end of a film. I've done that, but just didn't get there this time. It just seemed a bit, but we're gonna have to spoil the ending at some point. But it just felt a bit garbled.
Assume you've seen E.T., which is, again, an alien Spielberg one, which gets the big emotion at the end, yeah.
I believe I was a child, but I have seen it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And Close Encounters, we said.
I have not seen that, no.
Yeah, but also Spielberg does a great roller coaster chase movie. I mean, yeah, he's one of the people who kind of set the template for the summer blockbuster, alongside Lucas, Spielberg specifically with Jaws. And, yeah, obviously that's at its height in, like, Jurassic Park and films like that. But here, yeah, it's still working. Yeah, like I say, he does, like, a great, like, there's a big chase in the middle, and, like, the villains, like the Colin Farrell character, are sort of like comically evil, in a sort of very unsubtle way. They just want to like suppress information and capture these people and willing to do anything to do it. But like it does lead to some like really cool like chases and like say the bit of a train and stuff. Yeah, there's some like good car chases and things like that.
Yeah, and then there's the weird sort of psychic pursuit thing
Mm.
in the middle, which Colin Firth does, which again works really well. It's a really fun little gimmick. It really gives this film a bit of a unique edge beyond just we're going to chase you in cars and then trains.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Spielberg has some fun shooting it and having the characters appear in weird places and having them twitch and have people's faces reflected in knives and all that stuff. It's good. It's, as you might expect from Spielberg, it's very cinematic.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But then there's these plot issues kind of emerge. There's just so many unanswered questions. Like, it doesn't say, like, why were these people chosen to be the kind of bearer of the messages from the aliens? And, like, why are these events happening now? You know, they both have sort of, like, unusual abilities. But, like, one of them manifested his abilities 15 years ago and one now. Again, for similarly no reason. There's also a group of good guys led by Coleman Domingo, who's a great actor, doing well here, but very much in the kind of trope of the magical Negro is sort of coming through, and it's not really clear who these good guys are and what they're doing, what they want.
I believe they want to do a disclosure.
Yeah, or they're in opposition to the bad guys. But yeah, but it's just like, I just sat there thinking, like, I don't get this. And like, it was one of these, for a while, I was kind of like, there's a lot of questions here, so it's going to be interesting to see how they pay all this off, you know, tie it all up in a satisfactory way, which I'm expecting Spielberg to do. And then have this suddenly, about 2/3 of the way through, this sort of gut drop moment of, this isn't going to tie together, is it? It's just going to kind of leave a lot hanging, and it does.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite as possibly down on it from that angle. I think ultimately this is not a hard sci-fi film. This is one of those science fantasy films we have nowadays. And ultimately, if the answer to some aspects of the plot is it's magic, mate, then fair enough. But I think the problem for me was the film spent a lot of its runtime raising a lot of questions and didn't really answer them beyond a sort of look into the pretty light. And that didn't seem very satisfying. I've also seen a lot of people criticize it from a different plausibility angle, which is basically, you know, this scene where the aliens footage is played on television and everyone just believes it and the world changes seems vastly implausible. Like, to an extent, this is just because we're all so cynical, internet misinformation, AI, etc. And yeah, it is weird to see in the year 2026 a film with several quite long, slow minutes of people just sat there staring at their phones and having it played as an uplifting moment with inspirational music, because normally that's the dystopian shit.
Yeah, no, this did also register with me as not really working. So yeah, also it feels quite old-fashioned in this way, and like in some ways I feel that, like, yeah, I guess Spielberg he's set in a different time almost, things like that. And you know, in some ways, like making a good popcorn roller coaster chase summer blockbuster like Jurassic Park, I mean, we kind of need a bit more of that rather than dystopian doom or like things laced in irony. But at the same time, like, I do feel like the world has moved on so much from Spielberg's kind of prime, and he's clearly not moved on with it. And one of the big things in this film was very much, oh, the news has released information about aliens and everyone believes it. And it's just like, it just comes from a different time, like a time of, you know, the Washington Post revealing the truth, which Spielberg also made a big film about, you know, revealing the truth about sex abuse in the Catholic Church and people believing it. It's like, but we live in an age now where conspiracy theories and fake news and like the fact that a mainstream news channel can basically be like, aliens are real and like everyone believes it, is just seems almost laughable. And there's just absolutely no attempt to engage with, even a film that's basically a conspiracy thriller, there was like no attempt to engage with that idea of modern conspiracies, which I feel is like that was something really lacking for me.
Yeah, there is that. I mean, also, to be honest, a lot of the film, there's a lot of debate among the characters about, you know, how we are to disclose the information and when and what the best way is and what will happen and will it cause society to collapse or everyone to have a mass crisis of faith or something. Really spent a lot of time on that, considering religion isn't as widespread as it used to be, at least not in the Western world. But yeah, I felt like they spent a lot of time begging these questions, and some of them are quite interesting. And yeah, the film just ended the moment they started doing the bulk of a disclosure, and that was that. It does end up leaving you with this feeling that Spielberg didn't have much to say about what seems like the most interesting part of his premise.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Because the world has moved on from the sort of stories he wants to tell. He wants to tell stories like the Washington Post disclosure about the Vietnam War and things like that, which is like in an age of like gumshoe detectives hunting down the truth and exposing hidden lies and conspiracies, very All the President's Men. And that's kind of what this film is like. To be fair, like, he's a really good scene of like, in terms of like just like cinematic, you know, storytelling, like the long bit of like the presenter on screen reacting live to the revelation of aliens being real and the fact that the government's kept it secret for such a long period of time and things like that. That's like done and it's really tense and it's kind of well executed. But even though I was in the middle of kind of like, wow, this is like the film's like big emotional payoff and kind of being like, you know, Spielberg's doing some great storytelling here, but I couldn't dismiss the nagging bit in the back of my brain. It goes like, come on, mate, wouldn't go like this. You know, like, you been on Twitter lately? Probably the world is in a better place, the fact that Spielberg is not on Twitter. Even when he's doing something well, it's kind of let down by the fact that this is just fundamentally doesn't engage with the way news and information is consumed now, which is what this film is about, Disclosure Day. And it just feels like he wanted to make this film in like 2005, or wanted to set it in 2005, or even 1995 or 1985.
Yeah, it's weird because I guess a lot of the power of films like The Washington Post, a film I have not seen, and I'm basing this observation entirely on what you just said, I assume vests on the historical significance of the event. Like, we know that they did that disclosure and it actually mattered.
Yes.
And in this film, a lot of the, for me at least when watching it, and you'd really think Spielberg would be aware of this whilst making it, a lot of the tension sort of lay on the other side of the disclosure, or on the other side of the mystery. Like, I spent a lot of the film thinking, okay, let's see what happens when we find out what happens with this mystery, and what happens after this disclosure, and just didn't really have a satisfying answer to either. I mean, maybe if shortly before the disclosure, there's some revelations about how the main two characters, played by Josh O'Connor and Emily Blunt, played very well, by the way. There's good actors in this film as well.
Yeah, and Spielberg works well with good actors. He's always been a good actor, director, bringing great performances out, from Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, through to like Sam Neill in Jurassic Park.
Yeah, lots of good actors. But anyway, yeah, you get to the point where the Blunt and O'Connor characters find out how they got their alien superpowers. And if that part had really worked, if that part had absolutely sung, if I had felt, enormously connected to those characters and their beautiful catharsis, then maybe possibly I wouldn't have cared so much. But the disclosure itself felt a bit open-ended. But the fact that both elements kind of fell a bit flat for me, I think, left me a bit numb on the whole exercise.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, it comes back to this inconsistency that, when it's good, but, there's, elements that are working, but they're not all, working together and things like that. And the other factor that, makes it feel quite old is that, it's kind of full of, a grab bag of, kind of standard alien stuff, which, again, hasn't really, moved on, I felt, or, has nothing new to add to the cinematic lore around aliens. So, it mentions Roswell, there's conspiracies, there's Men in Black, there's crop circles. Some of the stuff is just there to be kind of oh, yeah, crop circles. But why? And the fact it's an alien thing. And, it's all been done so many times before.
Yeah, and again, massive spoilers. I'm going to spoil literally one of the last few shots of the film now, so we've already spoiled most of the rest of it. So why not do the rest? At the very, very end, an actual alien appears on screen in person in the narrative, and for me at least that would be a big moment in most films, what's our vision of aliens, and you see it and it's it's one of the greys with the big heads and the bulging eyes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I've seen them before. Everyone was right all along.
Yeah, exactly. It's not really got much to add. It feels very almost tired, really, in terms of its take on aliens and stuff. And Spielberg's done better takes on aliens before, more imaginative ones, considering he's Mr. Imagination.
Yeah, again, you'd think maybe, I don't know, I feel bad second guessing Steven Spielberg, but if it were me, I'd have seriously considered just leaving it off screen and mysterious rather than going, yeah, it's the guys again.
Which he has done in the past. Yeah. I'm thinking of Close Encounters especially, and it's one of those things when it kind of feels a bit old. And it's probably unfair to say well, the man's way over 80. Is he over 80? He's got to be.
I assume he's at least getting towards it. But yeah, I mean, I don't want the review to entirely degenerate into us just calling Steven Spielberg old. But no, yes, it does feel like a bit of an old-fashioned film.
Yeah, and it feels inconsistent. So 79, okay. Right, he's 79. Yeah, it just feels, again, just a bit out of touch, I suppose, with now and things like that. There's also a few, tonal inconsistencies, which I found a bit odd. Some bits are kind of really funny, but I don't know if they're supposed to be funny. There's a bit of some bad guy goons trying to break into an invisible house.
That was genuinely funny, to be fair. I have to assume that was meant to be sort of a bit silly. I don't know, you've almost definitely seen more Spielberg than me, but that came across as sort of intentionally quite fun and funny. There was far too many people sort of doing pratfalls for it to be a deadly serious action sequence.
Yeah, I think you're right, yeah. And there's a quite funny bit when they have to run over a phone to stop it being tracked, and actually getting across how difficult it is to actually run over a phone, something quite...
Yeah, so that was very funny. Yeah, that bit was the Emily Blunt character who has sort of emotional superpowers, and her partner, her boyfriend, her sort of vaguely well-meaning but also kind of rubbish boyfriend, played by Wyatt Russell of US Agent fame, who is a fun character, to be honest, possibly because he's one of the only characters who doesn't have any grand serious destiny business to do. He really is just there to be a sort of schlubby, slightly useless random dude.
Yeah, it works in in those bits, kind of in the way that the sarcastic humour in Indiana Jones works, despite the fact it's mainly a big chase roller coaster. And in some ways, everyone's been trying to recapture that for the last 20 or so years. Only a few of the films that have tried have come anywhere near as close to being as good as any of the classic Indiana Jones films. But overall, inconsistent. I mean, in the past, I've given out points or kudos for saying, like, it's good that you're really trying something, really aiming for something. And I guess, yeah, so I should, to be consistent myself, should say here that, like, I'm glad that Spielberg tried to pull off something that was ambitious and weird and, like, a bit different. Like, he could have just done another sci-fi chase movie, which he's done before, and it would have been fairly entertaining, or just yet another World War II film. But he did seem to try something different here, and yeah, it just doesn't quite mesh together. But I suppose, yeah, I'll come back to my main consistent point running through the podcast, which is, like, I respect the ambition and I respect the attempt to do something interesting.
Yep, I've left it quite late in the review, but it's probably time for me to say interesting failure.
Which is good, because a lot of the time we open with that, and so
yeah, exactly.
we'll close with it.
You thought you might not get it, guys, but no, there it was.
He snuck it in the last minute, like that goal that England didn't get on Tuesday. There's some football bants. That's my precisely 15 seconds of football bants I have in me. Feel free to not use any of this.
Good stuff.
The heat is really getting to me.
Okay, and last up today, it's Supergirl. This is, of course, the latest movie in the DC Universe cinematic reboot, spearheaded by James Gunn. This specific one is directed by Craig Gillespie and features Millie Alcock as Kara Zor-El, Superman's cousin, who was seen briefly at the end of, well, last year's Superman film, coming back to reclaim her dog Krypto from Superman. And now we see what happened next, as Kara and Krypto bum around space, embarking on a long solo pub crawl to celebrate her 23rd birthday, covered by a shell of cynicism and dissatisfaction, which turns out to stem from the fact that she's deeply traumatised from the fact that, unlike Clark Kent Superman, she can actually remember the destruction of Krypton, and it turns out wasn't a great thing to live through. Of course, as she continues her cynical drunken rampage, she eventually gets dragged into the real-life problems of Ruthie, a young girl who has her family killed by a bunch of space pirates, and gets involved in her quest for justice when those same pirates poison her dog, the bastards. We have seen this film. Alistair, what did you think of it?
Much more straightforward verdict here. Yeah, it's very much what I've said about quite a few summer blockbusters. You pay your £10, you get entertained for 2 hours, and it's very good on that basis. In that, yeah, I was completely entertained. It was fun. It was just an enjoyable night in the cinema. Very much in that classic summer blockbuster fun with the sort of James Gunn sprinkle on it. Yeah, and anything owes a lot to the classic Spielberg films of the 90s of your roller coaster chase movie type thing. Possibly, actually certainly, not as good as Superman last year. There's something about that film that just really nailed the whole, like, summer fun, right amount of emotion, right amount of fun, big summer movie moment. But this is certainly an entertaining way to spend in the cinema. I can't imagine anyone feeling they got shortchanged if they paid to go to see this.
Yeah, no, I had fun with this. It's watchable. It actually has a strong character at its core, a clear, understandable story. It's got a fairly tight runtime for a modern blockbuster of, I think, about an hour and 3/4. A pleasing lack of rambling side quests or pointless continuity. In fact, to be honest, it's quite self-contained. There's not even a massive sequel hook beyond the fact that the character's still alive. If anything, there's a hook that teases the fact that she'll be in next year's Superman sequel as she goes back to Metropolis and says she might stick around for a while. And yeah, Millie Alcock's really good in this. She was very charismatic in her cameo at the end of Superman, and she continues that here. She's got an enjoyable presence. As Alistair kind of said, it's a fairly straightforward character arc. You may be shocked to hear that the snarky, detached, constantly drunken, cynical character does eventually turn out to maybe care a little bit about other people underneath all that. But there is some good emotional business, laying out her background, all the Krypton stuff, which does give that a bit of depth and stir some emotion. Plus they put a dog in danger, which is a fairly effective, if slightly cheap way to make us feel something.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen a lot of kind of movies about grizzled characters who are sort of drunken, cynical, detached from the world, not really caring, and they meet someone, it's a good person in a bad situation who really needs someone tougher to look out for them, and it reveals that they actually have a heart and care underneath it. Usually this is about, like a sort of burly, middle-aged man. If anything, it's actually an interesting take that this time it's basically a young woman in her early 20s is the cynical, drunken, tough person who needs to meet a young, vulnerable person to bring out their true sense of caring, which is actually, a take I've not seen before, and obviously this one is just absolutely smashing it out of the park on the Bechdel tests. It's mainly a film about two young women running around, becoming friends and helping each other through their trauma, which, that sort of worked really well. In fact, I also quite like the fact that this is a film where the central interpersonal conflict is based around friendship. I know we are living through the age of the sexless summer blockbuster, and there's definitely something to be said in that, but also at the same time, there's something really to be said of a film that's just about friendship, especially friendship between two young women. But yes, in that kind of uncomplicated Hollywood way that actually in some way just comes across as really wholesome and nice in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're used But I say we used, I mean, it's may well have been about 15 years ago at this point, to bitch that every film had, romance shoehorned into it. And now I guess they've stopped doing that, and to an extent, people also feel it's a bit much. One day maybe they'll find equilibrium on this. But yeah, the relationship between the two main characters is good here. It probably does have the vague feeling of, a minor entry in the superhero canon. There's obviously a sort of a lower budget. It doesn't have, I guess, as you kind of said, the visual flair or the sort of sense of like soaring excitement that, say, Superman did. But it's fun, it's watchable. It does feel a bit like a Guardians of the Galaxy spin-off. That might just be the vague proximity of James Gunn bleeding through. But it's a tone that works for this story. It's not as if Supergirl, who is a literal alien, can't fit into that story.
Yeah, and there is very much the sort of James Gunn vibe coming through of like, there's the needle drops, there's the sort of fun, there's the banter, there's the sort of sense of adventure. Again, as we said with our Superman review, and also to a degree with Guardians of the Galaxy, this is a sort of Hollywoodized PG-12A James Gunn take. It doesn't have any of the bleakness, nihilism, or really kind of like edgelordy humour of a film like Super from quite a few years ago now, and things like that, but it does have a lot of fun. Clearly his style all over it.
True, but they do get to say shit a surprising amount of times, and few people are killed on camera in an impressively messy way for a 12A.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. And so it's just nice after Superman, who's such a good guy, he doesn't even swear, to have like a kind of moody teenage girl with a toilet mouth. Early 20s girl is also, again, quite funny. Yeah, and there were some great needle drops, especially enjoyed Wet Leg. I guess that's now like popular enough that it's become like an international hit. There is a kind of like a nice running through this like post-punk, pop-punk, rocky women with guitars kind of soundtrack to it. I guess obviously it suits the mood of a film about two young women. Yeah, so Wet Leg fits in at that point. I'm pretty sure one of the fight scenes was done to a cover of Decepticon as well, and there was a few other good girls with guitars rocking kind of soundtrack to this, which worked.
Yeah, I will be interested to see if this can find its target audience, possibly of young, cynical-ish teenage girls who will hook onto this as a sort of major generational film. It could happen.
Potentially when it hits streaming.
Yeah, and Jason Momoa is here, as he is in many DC films, this time playing Lobo. A role he probably fits better than he did Aquaman, to be honest. It's good fun. It's so comics accurate, it's almost silly, to be honest. Whereas Momoa as Aquaman required a little bit of stretching to basically turn Aquaman into a Jason Momoa character. Lobo basically already was Jason Momoa, so apart from painting him white and giving him the outfit, they haven't had to do much. And yeah, he's a very big, very silly, cartoonish character who very much suits the Jason Momoa vibe. Yeah, I don't know if the world needs a Lobo spin-off film, but he is very fun, and he's the sort of character who can just turn up and cause chaos. And if I want to do that with him more, I would be happy to see it.
Yeah, Jason Momoa was good as his character. Yeah, again, providing, I guess, the token male. Yeah, again, another grizzled badass with a lot of abs. I'm not exactly sure why he was wearing Kiss makeup.
Just because that's what Lobo does in the comics.
Fair enough, someone who was a big fan of Kiss, I guess, at one point. But
I mean, his whole body is like white, so I assume that's just the alien species he is. I don't think Lobo is meant to be a human.
No, but his facial makeup...
He is wearing black makeup on his eyes like Kiss do, yeah.
Yeah, and the sort of big triangles, it's very, very similar to Kiss. Which is fair enough, but the whole film has a heavy metal aesthetic to it, which is kind of odd because there isn't actually any real heavy metal in it. Again, it's sort of very much like 12A summer blockbusterified in that basically like we've got this kind of metal aesthetic, but we're not going to have any actual metal on it because your mainstream audiences might find that alienating. Go back to what I was saying before, I think it was actually the right call for the vibe to basically make it a lot of like girls with guitars as the soundtrack. But then again, there are plenty of women doing metal, but there is definitely a sort of metal-y aesthetic to it. Yeah, the Lobo character very much being one, but the villains are sort of people with leather jackets, spikes, a slightly scarified sort of facial effect. They're very alt-coded and very heavy metal aesthetic kind of thing. It almost feels like a bit 80s in that way, back in the time when you could have the villains with just like bikers who listen to heavy metal and they're bad because they're sort of heavy metal guys. Yeah, but it's an interesting aesthetic, but it does sort of work.
Yeah, I mean, this film does not really have an iconic villain. It's one of those superhero films where you're very much... The appeal is to go on a journey with the lead character. The villain is just someone for her to be opposed to, really. There's not any interest in getting, a massive actor in to play a massive villain to take over the film.
And it's not like a Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2 when, like, kind of the core interpersonal conflict of the film is, like, the hero and the villain. Like, a lot of films go, hero and a villain, two people know each other in their regular non-superhero lives, but take different courses because of their character. One to become a hero, one to become a villain. Yeah, in this one, I mean, Marvel have done this, like, countless times. So basically, a total badass just shows up to do evil stuff and then must must be stopped by someone embracing their own badassery. And it works, again, for a summer blockbuster arc. The villain is just very evil. And yeah, they're sort of space Vikings, and that they kidnap and traffic women in order to continue their all-male warrior race. And the badass berserker people, sort of Russian-coded as well. It's the sort of very generically Eastern European accents. I don't know if we're bringing back Russian-coded villains in this age of war in Ukraine and things like that, or if it's just a kind of, we wanted to give them some kind of something distinctive, and this is the least racist thing we could think of. But it works. I'll just say it works. It works. I mean, apologies to any Slavs who found this quite offensive. I mean, you are entitled to be a bit miffed by the sort of Russian-coded villains. Also, apologies against any Vikings out there. They didn't really capture how the Vikings were craftsmen and traders as well. This is a long-running joke about the study of Vikings and Norse culture, which doesn't really work.
It doesn't, if only because there's no mention of Vikings or Norse culture in this film.
No, but they are
just random alien pirates. I do get that they are doing a slightly Viking-esque thing.
Yeah. But they work as sort of villains for villain's sake. And I suppose the one thing where it does work is like they're kidnapping women, holding them, and like, yeah, which is again a kind of inspiring thing for Supergirl and her sidekick to save other women from the bad men.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to have the storyline where Supergirl is, compelled to rise out of her stupor and resume heroing, I guess one way to do that is to poison her dog. The other way to do that is to give her something properly fucking reprehensible to punch.
Yeah, exactly. And it works. Like I say, it works on that level. It doesn't have really much of anything to say about gender politics. I mean, the whole kind of kidnapped women thing, like it's not Fury Road. There is quite a nice bit. I mean, this isn't really a spoiler, but we are getting to this in the film when they free some of the kidnapped women, and one of them uses like a big cannon to take down some villains and save Supergirl. So they're not totally just damseled victims, but at the same time, we're a long way from Fury Road. Another thing that had a metal aesthetic and used it much better. But if we hold every summer blockbuster up to Fury Road, then they'll all be found wanting. So this, as I say, like it all worked in that sense of like this was a fun roller coaster, and I wanted some big cartoony villains for Supergirl to punch and eye laser.
Well, yeah, like there's one dialogue exchange where they talk about the fact that Superman gets to be Superman, but Supergirl does not get to be Superwoman. But they don't really go into it in any detail.
It's acknowledged. It's acknowledged.
It's acknowledged. So yeah, this isn't a game-changing masterpiece. It definitely does sit in the general snarky action movie tone without adding much to it. I think it's a decent rendition of it. Maybe one reason it's got slightly middling reviews. Maybe critics are just sick of this sort of thing unless you've done a masterpiece.
Yeah, I did appreciate how it was a lot less ironic than a lot of Marvel stuff. Although, yeah, there's snark, but it's not done with a kind of a wink and a nod to the audience of like we're sending up the kind of ridiculousness of the premise. The snark really comes from she's a teenage girl or early 20s girl who's in a mood and is also like covering up some trauma. So she's rude and bitter and says sarcastic things, but it's not done with a kind of ironic wink and a nod to the audience. It's very much, in fact, played straight up as moody teenager. And also the emotional flashback scene in the middle, kind of filling in her backstory, doing also the superhero origin stuff, I felt did work and added enough emotional flavour to the film to make it feel like there was clearly an emotional journey here for the character that I can get invested in beyond just her punching really nasty people.
Well, yeah, and, Superman's origin is one of these things that you can just assume everyone knows, but you probably do need to at least stop for 2 minutes to explain why Supergirl is different from Superman. It's a decent bit. It did feel surprisingly emotional, almost, the destruction of Krypton, which has become a bit of a trope at this point. I guess, speaking of comic lore and speaking of comics, it is probably my job as Captain Comics on the podcast to mention that this is a fairly direct adaptation of the comic Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow by Tom King and Bill Everly, a 8-issue miniseries now available as a graphic novel, which came out some point in the sort of early-ish 2020s, I think. And yeah, that's a great comic, to be honest. It's, I think, widely regarded as one of the better Supergirl comics, if not DC comics, of the last 10, 20 years or so. It's certainly the last 10 years. And James Gunn has been talking a lot about how, yeah, we're doing that. At some point, this film was going to be called Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow before they decided to just shorten it. But yeah, don't get me wrong, this is a decent movie. That is a much better comic. The comic has a very Tom King tone, which will mean nothing to the non-comic readers, which is basically there's a lot of contemplation, there's a lot of thoughtful narration about morals and trauma, there's a lot of sitting around thinking about things, and they have somewhat run it through the old Guardians of the Galaxy filter to turn it into a bit more of an action movie. The movie is fun, the comic is better, basically, and Bill Everly's art is absolutely gorgeous, just very delicate and beautiful and emotional, and really carries a lot of the darker stuff home. So yeah, all I'm really saying saying is, if you liked this, then I thoroughly recommend reading the comic because it's even better.
Yeah, it seems like, sort of classic novel adaptation, or graphic novel, I suppose, in this case, of, there's a good story here, but so we're running it through the summer blockbuster process to make it palatable to a mainstream audience. But definitely go and check out, I guess, the sort of more nuanced original version, which I've not read, but I think I would like to in the back of this, because, they've taken the story fundamentals here. Well, what's working here, as I said, is the story fundamentals are really, really good, which is, again, to contrast this to Disclosure Day. Disclosure Day has its, maybe a few more soaring, heights of kind of wow, this is why you pay to go to the cinema, to really experience something. But the story fundamentals are just all over the shop. Whereas, this is the sort of film where you can be like, well, I know I'm going to get what I want, consistent plot, character growth, emotional hooks, rise, spectacle. It gets all of that, and it does it well. It doesn't take any real risks, or, as I finished the Disclosure Day review by saying, prompts for trying something different. This really isn't trying something different beyond making it about women, which even at this point, it's been done quite a lot, although not in any way to the degree it's been done. This sort of film has been made about men, but it doesn't really try to do anything radical or different, but it does just work as a film in a way of it's entertaining and hits all the right emotional beats and narrative arcs. So I guess the props for doing something ambitious with Disclosure Day, but props for just delivering the fundamentals here as well, which I feel is important, because if you want to be entertained, those things need to be there. And it's easy to sneer at just the kind of basic craft of storytelling and emotional arcs, but that is what makes people want to go to the cinema, or I guess read a book as well. But this as a contained piece needs to have that storytelling to make people want to go to the cinema, and in that sense it's good.
Yep. I guess I finished the last one by saying it was an interesting failure, and I guess we have here its opposite number, the uninteresting success. Good job.
That's all we have time for this episode. Thanks for listening. If you have enjoyed this episode, then please visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can find other episodes of the podcast, bonus audio clips, and short written pieces by Nick and myself. Once you've done that, please leave us a review in your podcatcher of choice to help other people find out about the show.
And once you've done that, you can also follow us on social media. We are, I believe, on Blue Sky and Facebook, where you can hear basically when our episodes come out. We'll try and tell you if they're late as well. That's the sort of scintillating content we offer. Yep, you can also follow me, where I post slightly more jokes, on nickbryan.com on Blue Sky, nickbryan.com with the word dot on Instagram, and also nickbryan.com with just a dot again on the internet, where you can find out about my self-published comics.
You can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram and TikTok by searching for Alistair Ball, where I post more opinions on art, though not so much the film and TV kind, more the art gallery and theatre kind. If you enjoyed this segment on Mother Courage and her children, then head to Everything Theatre, where you can find my other theatre reviews. If you enjoyed my discussion of politics, head to my website, redtrainblog.com. And if you enjoyed the whole thing, then just follow my newsletter, The Post, which you can find details of on any of my social media channels. And if you enjoyed this show, then it's especially important to come back for the next episode, where we will be discussing the final season of The Bear. Will Carmi find any peace? We'll find out. Then we'll be discussing Hugh Jackman's latest whimsical tale of murder, investigation and comedy in The Sheep Detectives. Join us in 2 weeks to find out what we made of these two very totally different pieces of art. Until then, have a good one, stay cool, and see you soon. Bye.
Bye.